and welcome to this 30-minute special from KBIA's Missouri on Mic, Conversations from Missouri in its 200th year. I'm Becca Newton, and today we're talking about the tradition of storytelling. We'll be listening to Missourians from conversations we've captured throughout the year. And Sean Rost from the State Historical Society is with us today. Sean, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Certainly. I'm originally from Jefferson City, Missouri, and I guess my background in history really goes back to my birth in a lot of ways. Even as a young child, I would explore historic spaces and historic places in Missouri, but also throughout the United States on family vacations. And it became a passion that developed into a career in a lot of ways. So I've been doing this now with the Historical Society for 4 years almost, and it's been a lot of fun and enjoyable to meet a lot of people across the state. So oral history is my primary responsibility in handling the oral history department and the program there. I also handle the Our Missouri podcast, writing, researching, producing, and hosting that.
So the big point for us today is the history of storytelling, that tradition and how Missourians bring it into their own lives. So tell me about a little bit of the history of traditional Missouri storytelling. Where does that really come from?
Well, I think in a lot of ways it goes back to the beginning of the state and even farther back in time. Oral traditions and oral history are mixed into our generations and into our heritage. Everything from family genealogy to, a story that grandfather or grandmother or an aunt or uncle told over time, to even, community history. What used to be at a certain location has been passed down over time, and over time, even well after that building is gone or been turned into something else. It's something that's been passed along that, in some cases predates printing presses and then the modern word and goes all the way back to the earliest of traditions in many ways. So here in Missouri, it's something that we see passed on a regular basis between individuals, but, community history, societal history goes back in that in a lot of ways too.
Right, exactly, because history is not just what is written down on paper. History is what we tell people around us. Earlier, we were trying to decide, when does oral history become storytelling and when does storytelling become oral history? Because a lot of those are connected, and that oral history is passed down through storytelling, or familial stories become oral history later on.
Well, in a lot of ways with storytelling, it's, some can be fictional, some can be based in fact, some can be factual with a little bit of extra added on to it in a lot of ways. So I think storytelling in a lot of ways is quite significant in what it can offer, not only for cultural elements, societal elements, but also how it impacts our understanding of oral history as well.
So we definitely had a few interesting stories that were told that we got to learn about, familial history and past stories that maybe did not happen. A lot of tall tales come out of that, and people and those families tell those tall tales throughout time, so it becomes part of their family history.
Oh, absolutely. I think in a lot of ways, what becomes so important about oral history is that you have an individual witnessing an event, but there are many individuals at the same time and same place. And getting those different perspectives offers an example of how someone walks into a moment in time and how they remember it, because someone could read the newspaper and they could read it, interpret it one way, they could read it, interpret it another way. Collecting a lot of stories about similar events provides a very well-rounded perspective on that particular incident that helps historians to decipher what people are saying about an incident, but also how we interpret it in the future, how we interpret it in our own times and place.
Exactly. And like you just said, the way that we interpret the stories that we have had passed on to us dramatically affect how we view our future or how we tell stories in the future as well. Especially in the archives, when you get to hear all of these different stories from people. Is there anything that really stuck out to you that was very impactful of you either read or listened to and you just had to sit back and read it again or listen to it again because it's just so important or very interesting to hear?
Sure. I mean, there's a lot of life lessons to be had from these various oral histories. People who have lived to be in their 90s and 100s have seen a lot of things and have encountered a lot of things in their life. And just their basic advice about, how to prepare food or how to survive certain situations like that are all very valuable. If cows are laying down in the field, it means it's going to rain. That's one I've often heard. And I'm driving and I see cows laying down. I'm like looking at the sky, wondering, it's pretty clear today. What does that mean? My grandmother used to say, red at night, sailors delight. Red in the morning, sailors take warning. Meaning if it's red in the evening, it's going to be a good day for weather. If it's red in the morning with the sunrise, it's going to be bad weather. That was a common told one. Well, I mean, just a lot of ones just to think about in terms of how to just deal with people on a regular basis and just kind of be very diplomatic, I think, is a lot of the values to be learned, and that is how to approach certain situations without losing your cool. And I think that's one that I've often taken from people. Everything has an origin story, and, you can just say, hey, this is the way it is because it's always been that way. Or you can say, this chair has been in my family for 125 years, and this is who built it, and this is where it came from, and this is whose houses it's been in. And that kind of tells you a little bit of family history just within that history of where that chair goes. So I always tell people, look for the origin, try to find out why this is, and has it always been that way? Just to say, oh, it's always been that way, that's just how it is. It had to start somewhere. So always look and try to figure out the origins of that, whether it is a family event or a historical event.
I'm Becca Newton, and you're listening to a 30-minute special from KBIA's Missouri on Mic about our state's tradition of oral history and storytelling. We'll be hearing both stories and from storytellers about what drives them to keep this tradition alive. At one of the Missouri on Mic events this summer, the State Historical Society's bicentennial celebration in August, the team spoke to Gary Kuntz. Gary's from Kansas City and shared with us an Ozark folktale passed down from his father-in-law about the family dog, Dog, and how he miraculously survived a fluke hunting accident. Just as a warning, this story is a little graphic at times.
My father-in-law grew up in southern Missouri, in the Ozarks. And it was a while back, I got to talking to him and asking him, what did you do for fun? And he said, well, what would happen is, in the afternoon, after I finished chores, we would go out, and I'd call Dog. That was actually what he named his dog. And Dog had a particular style of dispatching the rabbit. He would get up close, and then Dog would take this big leap and land on top of the rabbit, and the rabbit would tumble, Dog would have it in its jaws, and they would have rabbit stew that night. I mean, you have to realize there is a history in Missouri with dogs. If you're going to brag on something in Missouri, it's impolite to brag on yourself. But you can brag on your dog or your livestock or something like that. That's fine. I thought, okay, anything interesting ever happen when you went rabbit hunting? He said, well, there was this one time. We'd gone out and we'd walked over the property several times, and I think we were both getting tired. And finally, we spooked a rabbit, and a rabbit took off running, and of course, Dog, he took off running. But this was a smart rabbit. It would dodge back and forth. And then they ran into the woods, and they were running so fast that Archie couldn't keep up with them. But he wasn't worried. He knew what was going to happen. Dog would always turn him in the woods, heading back towards the property, and he'd come out near the sawmill that his dad had set up. So he ran down the property, down to the edge, down to the holler, and he just waited. And sure enough, after a minute or two, out of the woods came the rabbit, and he was being chased by Dog. And the next thing you knew, that rabbit ran into the shed where the sawmill was. And Archie ran around, got to the opening just in time to see Dog take that big leap one more time, and that rabbit dodged, and Dog came down on the saw blade, which was turning. Cut him in half, stem to stern. Well, Archie said, at that point, he just yelled, "Ah! Dog's hurt!" And his paw reached over, grabbed that big lever, pulled it back, stopped the blade, looked, and on either side of the blade saw that half of Dog. And then he did the one cure that might work. He reached up on the ledge and pulled out that big jar of cloverleaf salve. Back then, they didn't have antibiotics. They used cloverleaf salve, and if it was meant to be, you healed. So his dad grabbed that big jar of cloverleaf salve, took a big handful out of it, slathered it up and down Dog real quick, slapped Dog back together, and then started wrapping Dog up with every piece of cloth that he could find inside that sawmill. Even took his own shirt off and wrapped Dog up from the nose to the tail and back to the nose, to all you could really see was one eye peeking out. Now, Dog was hurt bad. I mean, you can't get cut in half and not be hurt bad. Well, it was touch and go. In between chores, in between schools, he'd check on Dog, and Dog was alive until finally, after about a week, Archie's mom said, "All right, he's healthy enough. Take him out. You can put him on the porch." Archie picked him up, carried him out, made him comfortable on the porch. After another week on the porch, dog was looking pretty good, and finally his dad came by and says, well, I guess we need to unwrap him. So they started unwrapping him, starting at the nose, and then looked down. There dog laid. He looked kind of strange, but he laid there, and he's panting. He's breathing pretty good. So Archie finally said, okay, dog, come on, let's go, up. And dog got up and fell over. Archie says, no, come on, dog, up, come on. And dog got up and he fell over. That's when they noticed why dog looked strange. They were so much in a hurry to slap dog back together down at that sawmill, they didn't quite get him aligned right. In fact, they got 2 legs up and 2 legs down. And I just looked at Archie, I said, a dog can do that? They said, yeah, dogs are resilient. They can go on 2 legs. And actually, it made him a better rabbit hunter than before. He said dog would chase a rabbit on those 2 legs, and if he got tired, he'd just flip over and use the other 2. I kind of looked at my father-in-law thinking, is that story 100% true? On the other hand, he never would say.
Were you ever skeptical?
Of course not. He's my father-in-law.
We met Kathleen Boswell at the Missouri State Fair in Sedalia in August. She's a retired teacher and says since 5th grade, she's been a fan of author Laura Ingalls Wilder. Today, she practices this passion through Missouri Humanities Speakers Bureau in her portrayal of Wilder at events across the state. She shared with the Missouri on Mic team what it means to her to be a storyteller and the importance of recognizing our history.
Well, Laura began writing the books that made her so famous after her daughter had said, Mom, put all your savings in the stock market. And then the crash happened and they lost all their money. And so to keep from losing the farm, she started to write a book. And then there was so much to tell. And after The Little House in the Big Woods came out, the children clamored for more stories of Laura and Mary. And they were written during the Depression and the early days of World War II. And so my years in college way predates Wikipedia or Googling anything. And so when I was in college to be an English teacher, I took a children's literature course, and that was when I found out she lived in Mansfield, and we actually overlapped our lives by just a few years, and I was just devastated to think that I wasn't old enough to have gotten to meet her and just to know her. So I've always felt very connected, but I knew she didn't start writing the books until she was in her 60s, and that you really could not portray Laura and talk about the books if you're young. I love it when the children in the audience ask things like, and what happened to Jack the dog? And did you really do that naughty thing to Nellie Olson? And, you know, just the little details that they've remembered from the books that they ask about. For some children, there's one key element that will stick with them all their lives when they heard about it. For my son, it was Almanzo doing the giant pumpkin that he fed with milk and winning the prize at the county fair. Well, we're flyover country. I think probably the rest of the nation doesn't know that much about us, and we need to do a great job saying every place has a story to tell, just like I feel like every person has a story to tell, and their memory should be kept alive. And when you think about all this rich history that we have in our state, from Scott Joplin and ragtime to the cowboys bringing the cattle drives up, you know, Jesse James, all of it, good or bad, you know, you need to know about them.
I'm Becca Newton, and you're listening to a 30-minute special from KBIA's Missouri on Mic about our state's tradition of oral history and storytelling. Bard Alexander Silver wandered by the Missouri on Mic team in Carlingford, Ireland. Well, actually, the Central Missouri Renaissance Festival in Kingdom City in October. He shared a folktale about a mysterious Romani girl that his character met on his travels. As a note, he performed this piece in character.
This is one of my favorite, and it is based on a true event, and it is called The Gypsy Dancer. Now, in my travels, I have learned when you come across the camp, you announce yourself. They already know you're there, so you might as well announce yourself. And the other thing I've learned is if you approach a camp, have something to trade. For if you do not, you're going to lose something anyway. So have something to trade or share. And I come across this camp, and it's a porter camp. And how I can tell it was a porter camp, as I come in, I counted 15 adults and only one wagon. So it's a very, very porter camp. And they're finishing their evening meal. And as I approach, I ask if I could join the fire. They go, well, please join. And I carry a couple of canteens with me, and I had my good summer mead with me. So as I sit, I share out in opposite directions, and us adults sit and we talk, we converse for a wee bit. And as the talk finally dies down a wee bit, this wee little lass, and she may be 4 or 5 summers old at the most, the absolute most. She comes up to me, and she says, "Good bard." I go, "Aye." She goes, "Do you have any coin?" Now the man that I'm presuming is her father, he kind of pales and he tries to wave her off, and he goes, no, you cannot. And he's like, nay, she's an innocent. She can ask questions like that. Now people like me and you know we cannot, we know better, but she's an innocent. She can ask a question like that. And I look back at her, I go, I do, but why do you ask? And she gives me this heart-melting smile. And she goes, "Well, I'd love to dance for you, but I've been told I cannot dance unless someone pays." And yes, my heart melted right there. It truly did. Oh, it's like, "Well, please, yes, I would gladly pay to watch you dance." And her face lights up, and she runs back to the wagon and grabs 2 candles. And she comes back, and the man that I'm presuming is her father lights him with a brand from the fire, and she starts a very traditional fire dance. And it's just her. And as she starts to dance, the campfire actually dims a wee bit, and the drummers start. And as she dances, a wee bit of wind comes up and hits the candle. And you know the wee little wisp of smoke that comes off a candle when it flares? Well, as that flares, the wind catches that wee bit of smoke, swirls it around, and in a moment later, on either side of her is another dancer made of nothing but wind and smoke. Well, this is amazing. And she continues to dance, and again, another bit of wind, again the candles flutter, again swirls up, and yet another set of dancers. So you've got her up front, dancing, and on either side of her now it is 2 lasses of nothing but wind and smoke. And as she finishes, she bows, and as she bows, the wind catches the candles, blows the candles out, and blows all the smoke away, dancers and all. I'm truly amazed by this, I truly am. And I reach in my pouch blindly, and I pull out the first thing my fingers come across, which is a gold sovereign. It is quite a bit of coin, but it matters not, it's the first thing I come across, so I hand it to this lass, and her eyes get as big as saucers. And she squeezes, and she runs to the Vardo, runs to the wagon. And I look at the man, I go, "Good sir, the coin that she fought so hard for, that she danced so hard for, what is that for?" And he toes the dirt for a moment, and he goes, "When you come across this, we were finishing our evening meal." I go, "Aye." And he goes, "Well, stone soup does not go very far." Now, good folk, stone soup is a meal of desperation. What it is you take what little bit of dried food and what little bit of reserves you have left, you put it in a pot, and you take a stone that is heated by the fire, you put that in the pot to heat it. And it's basically flavored water is what it truly is. And he goes, "That was the last of our provisions, and that was the last of our stone soup. She's going to take the coin and buy us provisions." And I look again, and I go, "Good sir, another question." And he nods, he goes, "Well, you're a bard, I expect that." I go, "The other dancers, who were they?" And that is when he pales. He pales very, very, well, he changes about 3 sheets into white. And he goes, "You saw them?" I go, "I have the gift of sight. I can see things like that." He goes, "That was her mother and her sisters. We lost them earlier this year when we were told a fording was safe, and it was not. And that is where our other wagon went as well." It's like, "Oh, I see." "I have one more question, good sir," and he laughs at me. He goes, "Just one more for a bard." I go, fine, for the night." And he goes, "Aye, what is it?" I go, "May I spend the night?" He goes, "Oh, gladly. And they give me the coveted spot by the fire. Now, good folk, the spot by the fire at a camp like this is either reserved for the leader, the infirm, or the elderly, never a guest, and it gives me this coveted spot. I wake up the next morning. My muscles are sore. I am damp. And as I roll over and look at the fire, I realize the fire pit is partially full of water. There's not been a fire there in a very long time. As I stretch and walk about the muddy ground and start to walk about the camp and up the hill that surrounds the camp, I find the remnants of a burnt-out wagon. And at the top of the hill, I find 16 graves, one of which very small, and a little set of slippers hanging from it. I continue on that day, wondering exactly who or what I spent the evening with. And that, dear, is the tale of the Gypsy Dancer.
We met Linda Kuntz at the State Historical Society's bicentennial event in August. She's a professional storyteller who focuses on Missouri history. She recounted a story about the Haun's Mill Massacre during the Missouri Mormon Wars in the 1830s and about how Mother Amanda Barnes Smith's faith saved her son.
A family from Ohio decides that they are going to sell everything and move to Missouri to join members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So as they come in to Livingston County, they're met by a militia that takes their firearms and they're sent on their way. Well, Warren Smith, the father, had gotten a job as a blacksmith at Haun's Mill. And just a day or two after being there, when 240 armed militiamen came into the town shooting, the women immediately grabbed the children and ran for the woods. The men in the blacksmith shop came outside waving white handkerchiefs. We're unarmed, and were shot. And when they figured that they had killed everyone, they went inside. They found some boys hiding, took them out in the street, executed them. And no sooner had they arrived than they'd left. So the survivors came out to see the scene of carnage and counted up that 17 people had been killed, 15 had been wounded, and 4 more would die of their injuries later. Willard, one of their 11-year-old son, had been hiding in the woodpile, and he went inside and he found his father and realized that his father had been shot, but they had also stolen his boots. Then he found his brother Sardius, and he recognized him by the clothes he was wearing. Then he found his 7-year-old brother, Alma. Alma was alive. He'd been shot through the hip. So they hastily decided that they were going to bury the dead, and those that could gathered each other together, and they started walking to the next settlement. But Amanda couldn't go. Her son was mortally injured, and not knowing what to do, she just dropped to her knees in prayers, asked God, how can I help my son? And she was inspired to gather some ashes from the blacksmith shop and pour water through it, making a weak lye solution. And this lye solution was used to clean out his hip joint. And then she was directed to find a red elm or slippery elm tree and gather the inner bark, soak this in water, and this makes a gel that has pain-relieving and antiseptic properties. And then she asked her son, Alma, do you believe God can make you a new hip? And this sweet little boy looked up at his mom and said, Mama, if you believe it, I believe it. And the mom kept coming back and harassing them, telling them that they had to leave or they were going to be shot. And finally she just stood up and said, well, you've killed my husband. You've killed my oldest son. You've shot my youngest son. If you're going to shoot me, just shoot me. Well, it took 5 weeks, but finally, after 5 weeks, Alma was totally healed. So Amanda walked 3 miles to where the mob was stationed, retrieved her horses, packed what she could in her wagon, and she headed back to Hannibal, where they took the ferry to Quincy. And her descendants to this day tell this story of the miracle at Haun's Mill, where an Alma's hip grew back.
When people pass on, there is a sense of loss and sadness and the realization you're never going to hear someone's voice again. And we often have people who will contact us who will say, I just miss hearing their voice. I'd really like to hear it again. So we have had people who will thank us because I got to hear so-and-so's voice again because I had forgotten they had this oral history. I found it, and now I get to hear them tell the same stories that I had heard and rolled my eyes about, so many times. But now I get to hear it, and it means something to me once again. So that's something that's an added bonus in a lot of ways, is not only meeting so many wonderful people, going to so many wonderful places, seeing the state in all of its peculiarities, let's say, and meeting various characters, but also in a lot of ways preserving its history, not only for the future, for myself, for the Historical Society, for future scholars and interested individuals, but for their family as well. It provides what I like to call, an audio family tree, a audiovisual family tree, to where they can keep that for the future. That's not just a piece of paper that has a few people scattered about, but it's kind of the stories behind the individual as well.
Even on a personal or familial level, when you're getting together with all of your family in the holidays and you just whip out your recorder on your phone and you can say, tell me about that story again. I know I've heard it a million times, but this way we can record it and we can hear it and then we can pass it on even farther.
We always assume there's going to be a tomorrow. We always think that we can do this at some point in the future. And then a lot of people will say, I wish I would have done that. So that's why a lot of people reach out to me and say, I want to do this, but I don't know if I have the capability to do this. But other people will also say, well, we missed this person before they passed. We really want to make sure that we get this story preserved in a lot of ways. So yeah, it's one of those things where, the best way to preserve history is to try on a regular basis to preserve it. And I think people often struggle with the idea that what we are going through, awkward to say, right? What we're going through is not historical. Well, it is on many different levels, right? But if you think about, taking pictures with your camera on your phone, we often just kind of think, I don't need to take a picture of that building or that car because I'm going to see the same car going down the road every day, right? Well, the pictures that you see of Main Street in the 1950s or Model T cars from the 1920s and 1930s, we only have those pictures because people decided to take them. Now, granted, back then it was of value, right? I have a car and no one else has a car. I'm gonna hire a photographer to come out here and take a picture of it because they didn't have cameras very, very frequently either. But we tend to take the mundaneness of it now and forget to actually record what's going on in our daily lives. And I'm afraid in some cases that in the future we're not going to, we're going to have the pictures, but where are they going to be at? If they're on a various website, right? What happens if that website crashes? So we make assumptions about technology that's always going to be there. But again, we kind of have to back it up and protect it in a lot of ways. So always duplicate it. 3 forms is the preferred way. You always do it in 3 forms. For us, we do it with a CD, which is beginning to become antiquated. Even saying CDs now are something that sounds like it's from the olden days, right? My car doesn't have a CD player anymore, right? That was a shock one day when I bought that. CD form, a digital copy that goes on your computer, and then a written form. Ensures that in some way, if there is a destructive force that hits wherever your stuff is being held at, that something will be preserved, whether in the cloud or in a written form down in the future. So I always encourage people to not only take that shoebox full of photographs, full of documents, and thinking about donating it to an archive or the Historical Society, but also finding a way to digitize it if they can, and thinking about space and everything like that too, but also to make sure that you are preserving this so it's not lost, because we think there's a tomorrow. We don't know what tomorrow's going to hold.
Well, Sean, thank you so much for coming in today and teaching us all about oral history and the importance of storytelling in Missouri.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
This has been a 30-minute special from KBIA's Missouri on Mic, Conversations from Missouri's 200th year. Thanks to Sean Rost from the State Historical Society of Missouri for joining us. Thanks to the Burney Sisters for providing our music. And a special thanks to the entire Missouri on Mic team. The conversations you heard today were produced by Noah Zahn, Abigail Ruman, Reagan Wiles, and KBIA's Rebecca Smith. You can find more conversations from Missouri on Mic at kbia.org. I'm Becca Newton. Thanks for listening.